The scrap of land in this picture looks rather unimportant. It is a part of a theme park, although here it doesn't look very exciting. But it was the site once of a ride. However, it was also the site of a tragedy. A place that once offered an exhilarating experience was the cause of the loss of 4 lives. The park is Dreamworld in Queensland, Australia, and the ride was the Thunder River Rapids ride, an in-house developed water rapid experience. During its heyday, it was one of the theme park's most visited attractions, being one of the family-friendly rides on offer. The accident would focus a light on how disaster can come from something so unthreatening as a theme park ride. My name is John, and welcome to Plainly Difficult. This video wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for my Patreon, YouTube and Ko-fi supporters. If you want early access and ad-free videos, then you can from just £1 a month. And for higher tiers, you can even get your lovely name here at the start of the video. The Dreamworld that would turn into a nightmare for some. Okay, that was a bit of a mouthful of a title card, but we are where we are. Our story begins with the registration of a trademark. This was the name of Dreamworld, registered in 1973 to businessman John Longhurst. Longhurst envisioned his own Australian take on the Disney theme park. To enable this plan, he purchased 85 hectares or 210 acres of land in 1974 and set about building his very own Dream World. I should say the site he bought was in Coomera, Gold Coast, Queensland. His inspiration from Disney was pretty obvious, even hiring ex-Disney designers to bring his park to life. He would later remark on the similarity of the entrance building to his park in an interview with ourworlds.au. I knew that Disney was just the most wonderful place, and the first thing you saw was the Disneyland station, and it was always in my eyes. The most magnificent thing as you walked up there, it was sitting up high. Often the same train was in front of it, but this magnificent building, which was a railway station, sitting up there, and I thought, I'm going to make my entryway look like that station. John had made his money from a lawnmower business, but interestingly, he began the digging work on the park all by himself with a digger he had bought and had shipped over from Sydney. He would gain financial backers, and gradually his plot formed into what looked like a theme park. The park would initially open its first section to the public in December 1981, and after only 4 months of operation, over 250,000 guests would pass through Dreamworld's gates. The park had a mix of thrill and family rides, boasting Australia's first looping roller coaster and the park's own 6-storey IMAX screen. Over the following years, the park would add and grow different themed areas. By 1985, there were 7 areas themed off different parts of the world, aiming to give patrons of the park a full high-quality experience on par with, well, you guessed it, Disney. In 1986, a new area would open, and along with 7-day trading, the site went from strength to strength. This 8th area is very important for today's video, as it is the location of our disaster later on. This was Gold Rush country. It was themed after 19th century mining and gold speculation in Australia and the USA. It's a theme that often pops up in different theme parks. The Dreamworld's rendition will feel pretty familiar. It had a runaway train style ride and a river rapids ride upon opening on the 11th of December 1986. The new area also boasted a new train station for the Dreamworld Express, as well as various themed shops and areas. Now, the second ride that was open in the area when it opened up in December 1986 was heavily inspired by a new style of ride for the time. This was the River Rapids ride concept, initiated by Swiss company Intamin, the first of which opened in 1980 in Six Flags Astroworld. The ride type was pretty popular, hence being included at Dreamworld's new area. The ride at Dreamworld ran like this. After boarding a 6-person raft at a ride station, it is dispatched and pushed along the ride's water flow. Guests are treated to a number of sections of calm and rough waters, through troughs and tunnels, one section of which went under the minecart ride station building, which was a foam mountain. The ride reached a top speed of around 45 km an hour. After being thrashed and splashed around, each ride vehicle is brought up and then down to the ride station via a conveyor system. In total, the ride would have a roughly 4-minute journey time from station back to the station. The waves were generated by logs placed along the ride's troughs. This created the intended turbulence to make the ride experience exciting. The conveyor dragged the ride vehicles up over a crest to create a small ramp down into the ride station, which had a constant flow of pumped water running along it. Now the conveyor system has wooden slats spaced equally apart along the pulling chain, along the conveyor's chain, which the ride vehicle sat on when being pulled back towards the ride station. This had a few purposes. One was obviously a place for the ride vehicles to sit on, but it also offered a space if a ride guest was to fall off, so they wouldn't get mangled up by the machinery below. And thirdly, they offered somewhat protection from the raft being caught up and getting turned over. Various parts of the ride were built by different contractors, for example the ride vehicles being supplied by a Sydney-based company, and the rest of the parts largely being from off the shelf, for example motors and pumps being used for the conveyor and water management systems respectively. So the ride needs water to work, hardly a shocking statement I know. But the pumping of water was a vital part, as due to the backflow of the water pumps, without them running, the troughs would empty themselves. Thus the vessels would all just sit, not being moved. The ride had 2 pumps, but right from the start they had experienced issues. They often cut out due to overloading. This would be a constant issue that never really got fixed. The electrical system was set up for both pumps, so then they could be operated individually from one another on the operator's control panel. Now over the years the ride would be modified and upgraded. Some modifications were better than others, like more modern ride controls, but others would prove to be not so good. Within a few years the conveyor system was showing signs of fatigue. In 1988 an incident unfolded where a part of the conveyor shaft at the tail end sheared off. This caused 25 of the wooden slats to be smashed up. It required a partial rebuild. The 2 chains were salvageable, however. Just a year later, another incident occurred that damaged 3 slats, pointing to a common issue. As such, around this time the decision was made to remove every 2 in 3 slats to reduce the strain on the conveyor system. Interestingly, this seems to have been a unique modification for Dreamworld, as stated in EQUIPTMENT.org's report into the incident. There does not seem to be a theme park anywhere else that has made this change. Throughout the ride, load and unloading station areas, the channel that the raft sat in had support rails. They had been installed after the removal of the ride's original turntable. These were to keep the vehicles level during loading and prevented them from being tipped up. However, there was a small flaw here, as there is a gap between the end of the conveyor system and the start of the guide rails. When the water was flowing, this isn't a problem, as the ride vehicles just float over. But this could be an issue due to low or no water incidents, which would lead us on to the disaster. The disaster. It is the afternoon of the 25th of October 2016, and Dreamworld's day of amusements are in full-blown swing. The morning and lunchtime had proved to be a little troublesome for the River Rapids ride. The south pump tripped out twice, each time requiring evacuation of all guests and fully resetting the ride and refilling it with water. During the pre-operation inspections in the morning, the ride had seemed pretty fine, and the operators, after completing their checks, accepted the ride for its opening time of 10 AM. The whole week leading up to today has been a bit of a nightmare for operators, with the ride constantly tripping out. It was reset on the disaster day just after 1 PM, and once again guests were welcomed to the ride. Today, like every operational day, the ride is operating with 2 operators. The number 1, who is in charge of the actual working of the ride, and the number 2, he is there to help with loading and unloading. Both roles require specific training. Usually operator 1 is the more experienced person. Today, the Operator 2 position is being manned by a member of staff with little experience on the ride. Although the staff member having around 2 years of experience at the park, they had only been trained for their day's position that morning. After the second ride restart, the number 1 operator was relieved for the afternoon. The relief is an experienced member of staff with over 4 years at the park. During the handover, they were informed of the pump issues plaguing the day. The 2 operators ran the ride for approximately 20 minutes or so, loading and unloading and dispatching guests on the rafts. The second operator wanted to swap positions so she could man the main panel, but she struggled to get the attention of operator number 1. Raft 6 was loaded and released into the water trough at roughly 2 PM, followed by Raft 5 around a minute later. Both rafts would get to the conveyor in around 4 minutes' time. The 2 rafts were roughly 1 minute apart, and their occupants had fun as they crashed around the rapids as intended. At 4 minutes past 2, the south pump began to fail. Quickly, the water level lowered. Around the same time, Raft 6 is descending the conveyor towards the unloading area. By now, the water had gone down below the guide rails. As such, the raft just got stuck. Seeing this, the number 2 operator tried to get the attention of the number 1 operator, but she didn't succeed. Operator number 1 was loading guests onto an empty raft. Noticing the lowering water levels, he got them back off and got them to leave the ride area. A few seconds later, Raft 5 is picked up by the conveyor. Raft 6 is still stuck on the guide rails at the end of the down part of the conveyor. Operator number 1, seeing the conveyor still running, went to shut the ride down. Although this is not 100% known, as later the operator's statements would be a little bit contradictory. Anyway, Raft 5 was now at the crest of the conveyor, about to make its way slowly down to the stranded Raft 6. At 5 minutes past 2, Raft 6 bumps into Raft 5. The conveyor is still pushing the latter towards the former. After a few more seconds, the 2 rafts start to pivot upwards. The fourth of the conveyor continues to push 5 up against the stuck Raft 6. This caused Raft 5 to be pushed vertically as Raft 6 slammed back down horizontally. During this time, 2 people were thrown from Raft 5. 2 more were trapped in the raft and 2 managed to climb out to safety. The conveyor around this time slowly stops. A passenger aboard Raft 6, seeing one of the 2 people ejected from Raft 5 into the watercourse, jumped down to assist, initiating CPR. He was a true hero of the day, and his name is Stephen Anthorpe. The rest of the people aboard Raft 6 were evacuated, and the 2 who had climbed out of the Raft 5 were quickly moved to safety. The area was awash with park first aiders and operators from other rides within just a few minutes of the alarm being put out. Emergency services were called, and they were also pretty quick to attend the theme park. It was soon apparent that 4 people had lost their lives that day in the accident. The victims were Kate Goodchild, Luke Dorset, Roosba, Arigi and Cindy Lowe. The park was closed and not allowed to reopen by the Queensland Police, as the ride was being treated as a crime scene, at least immediately after the disaster. The park was announced to be reopened for a memorial service on the 28th, but this was quickly cancelled. Dreamworld CEO Craig Davidson said that the park was working with police to try and determine what went wrong. He also said, "We're deeply shocked and saddened by this. Our hearts and our thoughts go to the families involved and to their loved ones," as stated in Syracuse.com. The disaster would spell the end of the ride, where it would be over the following months be dismantled and fenced off from the public. The park would reopen to the public 6 weeks post-disaster, as said in The Guardian, to modest crowds. The disaster would also cause theme parks across the world to reassess their own river rapids rides, causing extra safety checks in response. But of course now we need to look at the investigation about our river rapids disaster and its aftermath. After the disaster. The disaster would be dug into initially by the police, but would eventually be investigated by the coroner. And oh boy, the inquest would find a lot of concerning issues with the ride. The inquest would hear evidence of witness statements over roughly 18 days throughout 2018. Issues with the ride's spotty pass were heard, and a suspiciously similar incident in 2014 was uncovered, where this time the ride operator was blamed and failed. It was discovered that operators were not made aware of the function of the emergency stop buttons installed in the loading and unloading areas, where activation would have stopped the conveyor belt instantly. This showed a serious lack of training. In addition, it was found that staff were not given refresher training and were not adequately monitored in case they struggled with their workload. Post-accident analysis found neither emergency stop plungers had been activated during the crash. Operator number 1 would later state that they found the ride very difficult to manage due to the multiple tasks needed to be undertaken to get the ride operational. This clearly shows why the conveyor ran so long after the pump's failure. No one working the ride at 2 PM knew how to stop it properly. But what we need to know is, how did the ride fail in such a dangerous state? Testing found that if just one of the pumps failed, the water level on the ride would drop below the guide rails at the loading station, and no method of level monitoring was provided for operators. Not even level markers, like the ones you get in swimming pools. Monitoring of the pumps was via a small amp meter and an illuminated light if tripped out. There was no automatic cutout or audible alarm if the water level became dangerously low. On top of this, the pumps and conveyor system were completely separate from one another, meaning that if one failed, the other could continue. This was a key factor in the accident, as it enabled Raft 5 to enter the conveyor after another raft was stranded in front of it. Ideally, if one part failed, then the whole ride should really shut down. In addition to this, there was stop gates at the beginning of the conveyor system, which could detect if a raft was stuck, which in theory would have stopped the system. However, these weren't installed at the more important end closest to the guide bars. The lack of automatic controls added to the already overloaded and undertrained operators. The inquest would summarise its findings in its 2020 published public report. It is clear that the expert evidence at the incident, the design and construction of the TRRR at conveyor and unload area pose a significant risk to health and safety of patrons. The hazards associated with configuration of the ride identified by the experts and investigators were significant. The problem with the ride came down from the top, as noted by Coroner James McDougall. Such a culpable culture can exist only when leadership from the board down are careless in respect of safety. Sir Ardent Leisure, the owner of Dreamworld, would not have a fun time, even before the release of the inquest results. CEO Deborah Thomas did not contact the victims directly, which was reported in the press, and she was slammed for this. On top of that, the disaster tanked the company's stock, leading to a 310 million Australian dollars knocked off of its market cap. Once the inquest was released, the company would get another hit, with 3 criminal charges levied against it. These were from the Work Health and Safety Act, with each charge having a maximum fine of 1.2 million Australian dollars. On the 29th of July 2020, Ardent Leisure would plead guilty to the 3 charges, and on the 28th of September the same year, the company would be given the maximum fine of 3.6 million Australian dollars. And this leads us back to this picture of the empty scrub of land being made ready for a new ride. Interestingly, Steel Taipan, which would replace the River Rapids ride, would also require the demolition of the Gold Rush Country's other opening ride, the Eureka Mountain ride, which at around the same time as the disaster had been condemned due to safety concerns, which is probably not that surprising. So it's scale time. And this is what I've got for my root cause analysis card. Do you agree? Please let me know in the comments below. I always like to find out. This is a Plain Difficult production. All videos on the channel are Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike licensed. Plain Difficult videos are produced by me, John, in a currently very windy and very wet corner of southern London, UK. And all that's left to say is thank you very much for watching, and Mr. Music, can you do us a favour and play us out, please?